now. All right, so the war is over, right? The war is over. We won, glorious America. We're here. Now we're faced with the situation that we have to figure out how to govern this thing, right? 1781 to 1789, the United States is ruled under a thing called the Articles of Confederation. So the Articles of Confederation is the first governing document of the United States. Eric, are you with us? Have you been hearing everything?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Zoom did an update and screwed up all my links and passwords and everything. And I didn't realize that until none of you showed up on time. So we're okay now. Hopefully the link will be the same in the future. All right, so the Articles of Confederation. It's the first governing document of the United States. We're independent now. We have to rule our own selves. And so we get together and we write this document up. This document is what we in the history business call a hot mess. Okay, it does not work very well. We, right out the gates, we kind of fail at democracy at the very beginning. All right, so the Articles of Confederation, basically what it does is it gives us a very, very weak president, a very, very weak executive, like basically no executive, essentially. The executive is so weak that he can't do anything really. He basically just like says when the meeting starts and says when the meeting ends, and that's basically all he can do. He has basically no power. Okay. The Articles of Confederation also makes it so that there's no taxes. There's no federal taxes. There's no federal system really. There's no federal taxes, no army, no navy, no court system. There's nothing there unifying the colonies or the states. Now they're states. Unifying the states. The states also make their own money. They make their own money. They have their own court systems. The states can like charge. They can like tax stuff from other states, right? It's a mess. It's a mess. The Articles of Confederation basically is a loose agreement that the states will be partners, but not actually work together. It's a loose agreement that the states will be partners, but they're not actually going to work together. Okay, it's also organized, if you see over here, it's organized one state, one vote, which means teeny tiny Rhode Island and big giant Virginia have the same vote. And in order to pass any laws at all, you need 9 out of the 13 states to pass. And every state needs to agree in order to amend the articles. So when was the last time all 13 of these colonies agreed on anything? Basically never, right? Basically never. The last thing they all barely agreed on was the Declaration of Independence. And that's just about the only thing they'd agreed on was the Declaration of Independence. And even then, like the southern states were kind of like not totally on board, you know? So we have some major issues going on. What do you guys anticipate? All 3 of you, I'll go ahead and unmute yourselves. Tell me what do you anticipate to be the biggest problems the United States is going to face under the Articles of Confederation?
Gridlock and not really doing anything.
Okay, nothing gets passed. That's true. What else?
They're not making money like altogether because each state is for itself and there's no taxes.
Yeah. Okay. What else? That's Shivani. That is a very, very big problem. What else?
Since the central government isn't as strong, it's just going to give too much power to the state governments.
Okay. What else? I think there's another big problem. Big problem. If your country has no army, what happens?
Can be vulnerable to attack. There's no
Yeah.
protection system.
Yeah. And who might attack us?
England.
England, first of all, the most powerful country in the planet that we just pissed off. Okay, who else?
Spain.
Nah, they suck. I mean, theoretically, Spain or France could attack us. Native Americans, right? We have massive tribes of Native Americans or rebels, rebellions, right? So, big problem number one in your notes. I want you to put this big problem number one. Probably the single biggest problem with the Articles of Confederation is that the United States has massive, massive debt. Massive debt and no ability to gain money. Basically, no ability to gain money. Now, what's the problem with this debt? I want you to describe what you anticipate the debt to look like. Is this debt evenly distributed amongst the 13 states, or is the debt unevenly distributed? What would you expect? Eric, what do you expect?
I think it would be pretty uneven.
Pretty uneven. Okay, that's correct. And who would you anticipate has the highest debt?
I feel like it would be the New England colonies.
Right.
'Cause they would be
Specifically
the most
Massachusetts.
high.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
So put in there that the United States is greatly in debt as a country, and the debt is uneven. Massachusetts by itself is holding like half of the debt of the country. Right? We just fought a war. Wars are super expensive. Right? The British, we had a naval battle in New York Harbor. We had a naval battle in Charleston Harbor. We had one in New York Harbor, Charleston Harbor, Baltimore Harbor, Boston Harbor, right? Boston's been occupied at this point. Boston's been occupied for almost 10 years. It means Boston Harbor has been shut down for like 7 or 8 years where they couldn't make a single penny, right? This is a big, big problem, big problem. And New England is really unevenly bearing the burden of the costs, right? Especially Massachusetts. Because Massachusetts, you got to remember, the revolution started in Massachusetts like 2 years earlier as well, right? And so the people of Massachusetts are sitting on an extra 2 years worth of debt. And the Massachusetts has the other problem is they have no cash crops, right? So in there, put the southern states pay all of their debts off within just a couple of months. By the end of the year, basically, the southern states are out of debt. Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia, they're basically done. And they had very relatively little fighting on their land, right? Relatively speaking, those states came out unscathed. They didn't have big, massive naval battles, right? And they also have free labor where they don't have to pay their workers. And they have cash crops that everyone wants to buy, right? So the southern states are making money, right? And the mid-Atlantic states are making money too, because the mid-Atlantic states run all the shipping companies, right? But the problem is New England has nothing. They got nothing. All they have is poverty. This is going to bring us to our next number, I think big number S, I think. Articles of Confederation should have been R, I think. Is that right?
It was Q, I think. Articles.
Okay. I think you guys are just slightly off from the in-person, like you just numbered things differently. Okay, articles, you have it as Q. All right, so big number R is called Shays Rebellion. Shays Rebellion. All right, so Shays Rebellion is a rebellion in Western Massachusetts. It's a rebellion in Western Massachusetts. Okay, so it's led by a man named Daniel Shays. So this is not Shays like possessive, it's Shays named after him, right? So Daniel Shays. Now, Massachusetts had massive, massive debt, okay? All of their money was coming from tariffs. So all their money is coming from tariffs. What is a tariff? Anika, can you remind us what a tariff is?
Is it like a tax on imports or exports?
On imports, usually, yeah. It's like a tariff on, like, say, tea you're buying from England or something like that, right? Okay, so it's funded basically totally by tariffs. And Massachusetts passes a law that they want to collect money on, like whiskey and on some other stuff. But the problem is that the farmers of Massachusetts are dead broke. They got nothing. Okay, they're dead broke. What happens is we have a court official who comes out, tries to collect the money under the threat that if you aren't paying your debts, you can be thrown in jail. Right? So he comes out to try to collect the money, and Daniel Shays basically punches the guy and starts to beat him down because he says, "You're not going to come and collect our money." Now, Shays fought in the Revolutionary War, and so did a lot of these other people, and they didn't get paid for it. When they signed up to fight the Revolutionary War, the states had agreed to pay them after the war was over, but they didn't have any money, so no one got paid. So you have a whole bunch of people who just spent the last 5 years fighting. They're all armed, and they're all broke. You guys see the recipe for problems here? Right? So the rebellion breaks out. We get hundreds and hundreds of farmers in Western Massachusetts. They all get their guns out and they all break out. And initially, Governor Hancock doesn't want to do anything. He basically wants to run Massachusetts with no government, essentially, is how he's trying to run things. Now, what is Hancock famous for? He's a patriot, but what was he doing before? His signature, yeah, Anika. But what else? Before he was signing his name, what was he doing? In the lead up to it, in the revolution. Shivani, what was he doing?
Was it smuggling?
Yeah, he was the richest smuggler in the whole country. And so, of course, the richest smuggler in the country is now governor. So, of course, he's not too interested in collecting taxes because he doesn't want to collect taxes on his own smuggling operations. Right? But this becomes a real problem because the Shays Rebellion, the rebels start to move and they try to take over the Springfield Armory. That's important. They try to take over the Springfield Armory. That's where Massachusetts stores all of its gunpowder and weapons, in the Springfield Armory. They try to take it over, and so Hancock has to raise an army, right? He asks the people of Massachusetts to fight, and a lot of the people of Massachusetts say, "Screw you. I don't want to fight. You didn't pay me last time I fought for you, and I mostly agree with Shays." Like a lot of the people of Massachusetts are on the side of Shays. A lot of them are, right? And they say, you didn't pay us last time, man. Why would we fight for you this time? So Hancock asks the other states and says, "Hey, help us out." And the other states basically say, "You're on your own, dude. We're not going to help you." Virginia's like, "Nah, screw you." Right? Virginia basically always kind of mostly hates Massachusetts, you know? Virginia and Massachusetts are like frenemies. They don't really like each other that much. And so Virginia basically is like, "Nah, dude, we've already paid our money. We're good. This is a Massachusetts problem," basically, right? This becomes an issue. Eventually, they do raise up an army in Massachusetts, and they send the army out, and they do get in a series of battles against the farmers. And the Shays Rebellion does kind of peter out after time. I mean, they're farmers. They have to go home. They have to harvest the food. You know what I mean? Otherwise, they're going to starve in the wintertime. So it does peter out over time, but this represents a huge, huge problem. Okay? You are almost 100% guaranteed to have this question on the test. And the question is, what's the importance of Shays Rebellion? Shays Rebellion is important for two reasons. One, it exposes that the Articles of Confederation are not strong enough to handle the problems that the country is going to face. And two, the country needs a stronger government. Okay, so here's some differing opinions on here. Anika, can you read our Thomas Jefferson quote for us, please?
The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Thomas Jefferson.
It is its natural manure, yeah. So the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. This is one of Thomas Jefferson's most famous quotes, of course, right? This is the quote that like militia people put on their t-shirts all the time. When a militia person shot a city inspector in West Valley City just a few months ago, this is what they had on their t-shirt. Yeah. Thomas Jefferson, he is the ambassador to France. So he's living in Paris at the time. And when he hears about the Shays Rebellion, he basically says, good. Like he's on the side of the rebels, essentially. Jefferson is. All right, here's Washington. Here's Washington. Eric, can you read our Washington quote for us?
You talk, my good sir, of employing influence to appease the present tumults in Massachusetts. I know not where that influence is to be found, or, if attainable, that it would be a proper remedy for the disorders. Influence is not government. Let us have a government by which our lives, liberties, and properties will be secured, or let us know the worst at once.
Good. Shivani, who's Washington quoting in that?
Is it Locke? It's Locke.
Yeah, where's Locke? Where do you see Locke?
The life, liberty, and properties,
Yeah.
but not the property part. Well,
Yeah.
no, it is the property part. Yeah.
Locke says property. Jefferson changed it to pursuit of happiness, right? But yeah, Washington is directly quoting Locke here, right? He says, in order to preserve our Lockean ideals, we got to get on board, right? So Washington, Adams, Franklin, they all start to argue in favor of a new government. Washington, Adams, and Franklin are starting to argue in favor of a new government. At this point in time, Franklin is very old. His health is not great, so Franklin's kind of mostly out of the picture. But Washington and Adams are working together. This is where we're going to get to big number S. Big number S, the Federalist Papers. I forgot the date, but the Federalist Papers, the dates are the same as the Shays Rebellion dates, basically. All right, this is where we're going to introduce ourselves to two different founding fathers, the last two of the big six. The last two of the big six, okay? These two both are considerably younger than the rest. Okay, Madison is about 20 years younger than Washington, and Hamilton's about 30 years younger than Washington, right? So these two are both considerably younger than the others. All right, so let's better know James Madison first. All right, I'm sorry, let's define the Federalist Papers. So the Federalist Papers are a series of essays promoting the idea that we need a new constitution. It's a series of essays promoting the idea that we need a new constitution. In the essays, Hamilton, Madison, and to a lesser extent Jay, argue with each other about what the government should look like. One of them will say, we think that the president should have this power, powers A, B, C, and D. And then the other one will say, I believe that the president should have A, B, and C, but D should be in the Congress. And then he comes back and says, well, D can't be in the Congress because of this reason, right? They're going back and forth on this. They get like 6 back and forth on what Congress should look like, 5 back and forth on what the courts should look like, right? And they're publishing these things in the newspapers, and they're writing them up as, 10 pages or so, and they're publishing them under like pseudonyms. They're all publishing them under pseudonyms where they're kind of arguing with each other. Now, Jay writes only just a couple of them. Madison writes some of them, and Hamilton writes, there's like 95. Hamilton writes 55 out of the 95. 55 of the 95. Madison writes like 20 something. Jay only writes a couple. Jay only writes a handful of them. All right, so let's deal with Madison first. Okay, Madison was born rich. He was born a rich slave owner from Virginia. A rich slave owner from Virginia. And he is a self-taught lawyer. He rises to prominence by arguing in the Virginia legislature that Virginia should not have an official religion. So he's arguing against the Church of England. saying that they should not have the Church of England as their official religion. Previously, Virginia had required everybody to be an Anglican. And Madison makes the argument that you should be able to pick whatever religion you want. Jefferson actually helped him with that argument, but that's the argument that rises him to prominence. He's arguing in favor of freedom of religion. Madison also becomes famous for writing the Federalist Papers, of course, and he's going to go on to become the primary author of the Constitution. He's the primary author of the Constitution. Okay, so next, Hamilton. Hamilton is the only of the big six, the only founding father that was not born in the United States. He was born in the West Indies, and we don't exactly know what island he was born on because he didn't know what island he was born on. But we think it's somewhere in Barbados. Okay. He was an orphan. He was an orphan. His dad was not even in the picture at all, and his mother died when he was pretty young. And he grew up really, really poor. He's one of the only founding fathers who grew up dirt poor. Immigrated to the United States, moved to New York, and put himself through law school. And then during the Revolutionary War, he fought with Washington, not fighting Washington, but fighting alongside Washington. He fought alongside Washington, and he worked his way up the ranks, and he became Washington's like right-hand man. Washington didn't write very often. Washington doesn't write a lot of like speeches and things. It turns out that Hamilton ends up writing most of the stuff, and he puts Washington's name on it. Yeah. Hamilton becomes famous for the Federalist Papers. For the Federalist Papers, he becomes, one of the primary author of the Federalist Papers and one of the primary authors of the Constitution. These two men are probably number 1 and 2 for writing the Constitution. Okay, probably these two men, followed by Adams, probably. Okay. That is where we're going to stop there. Let me pull up your class really quick. Do you guys have questions? Hey, have you guys, where are you? Do you guys have questions about any of this at all? Okay. So your new discussion for this quarter, for this week, hold on, I can't. There we go. Okay, so the discussion for this week is right here, and it's Federalist number 10. Okay, Federalist number 10. Now there's 95 of these things. Generally speaking, Federalist number 10, most historians consider Federalist number 10 to be the greatest work. It's by Madison, and Madison is arguing about how the Union is a safeguard against domestic factions, right? Especially within the context of Shays' Rebellion and stuff. This is how Madison says that the government can save us from factional violence and stuff. And Madison is writing this whole thing, okay? Your discussion this week is based on this. You have to read Federalist 10, and then you have to pose a question, and then you have to respond to at least 4 other people's questions, okay? The quality of grade you get for your question is based on how much of a conversation you can keep going. So if you pose your question on Sunday and you get no responses, you failed. This means you have to pose a question that's good enough to keep people talking, and you have to post it early in the week, right? If you post one today, then that will basically guarantee that you're one of the first ones people see, and it's one of the first ones people interact with. Does that make sense? But if you wait until like say Sunday afternoon and post it, then no one will interact with you. Is that you're clear with me? Okay. Read the Federalist paper number 10 and then come up with a question from it. Did any of you guys read this in your English class?
Yeah.
All 3 of you probably should have, right? Because it's the IB English class. Yeah, IB plus AP, right? A lot of the class has already read it too. About a third of the people have read this already, and that's fine. That's fine. Because they all got it wrong today when I was asking them about it. So it shows me that perhaps they need to read it more closely. Okay. I guarantee every single group today got it wrong when I was asking them very simple questions. Okay. Next time I see you, you guys are going to take a quiz on Federalist 10. Okay. You're going to take a quiz on Federalist 10. And I'm not telling you exactly what's on the quiz, but I'm pretty sure the question is going to be, what does Madison think factions are? What is a faction? Right? Some version of that. Your question is going to be something like that. And that's the question I posed to every group today in class, and every single group got it wrong. Okay? So, I mean, it's right here in the very first line, right? To break and control the violence, the tendency to break and control the violence of a faction. And it's also right here in the title. So I think it's a pretty central idea, right? You need to know what he's talking about. So your question will be something along those lines. Okay? Cool, cool. All right, do you guys have any questions about this? All right, I am going to stop recording.